Hello, this is Cynthia Sue Larson with RealityShifters.com, and today I'd love to talk with you about an amazing thing that happened. It's a gift for all of us, and I saw my favorite bird, a peregrine falcon, in my garden. So this is a picture of it. You can kind of see that. That's looking, get it so you can see it better. That's looking out the window in my living room, and I'll explain what happened. It's really quite extraordinary. I was basically just doing my usual work, looking out the window, when I saw a huge bird land in our front garden Gravenstein apple tree. And it was only perched about 3 feet off the ground, which seems unusual for a bird of that size. It has huge claws, bright orange, and I was pretty sure it was a young peregrine because I had been watching them at the UC Berkeley campus. They have a falcon camera up in the campanile where the 3 eggs had hatched earlier this year, and the fledglings just took off from the nest, I think last month. So I'd been watching these birds, but I don't live anywhere, I'm not that close to campus. I live in Berkeley, but I'm not right there. So I didn't expect that I'd ever see one of those birds, but it gets better than that because I'm looking at the apple tree and I see the bird is watching out on the street. It's looking away from the house, but it's also aware that I'm there. It does swivel its head and look directly at me, and I'm about 10 feet away from the window. This bird has extraordinary vision. It was hunting, I think, looking for gophers in the garden. And there were some people out on the street. There had been a tree trimming project. A young mother with her child was there, and the peregrine was watching them. And then I thought, well, I'll just get a few minutes and it'll fly away. And sure enough, it did start to fly away, right at me. I could see it coming right at me. It made eye contact. I'm about 10 feet from the window. It's coming directly at me. And then it goes up onto the roof, showing its beautiful plumage, just this golden color on its chest, gorgeous. And now apparently it's either gone over the roof or it's on the roof. So I went out to go see where is it, and long story short, I saw that peregrine come toward me like it did that first time, looking me straight in the eye. I'm inside the house, but it's looking at me, and it comes straight at me, and it just goes up on, above or onto the roof. And the picture was taken when the peregrine landed just outside, kind of by the front porch there. Try to get it so you can see it. Yep. So it was right over our front porch, watching the garden. And it occurred to me, this is remarkable on so many levels, because this is my favorite bird, which is not something I talk about because I don't expect to see them. It's just a bird I've loved for no apparent reason, but all my life it's been a favorite of mine since I saw it in a children's book, I think. That must have been the first time. But what's remarkable for me is that I had been doing some review of the work of someone named Dan Moonhawk Alfred. And he's a very special person in my life, passed away now, but he had been integral in the dialogues of indigenous native people, scientists from the indigenous community, the First Nations people. You might call them Indians. I'm not sure what they prefer. Each person has their own preference, but from the Blackfoot tribe, the Navajo Nation, people would come sometimes from Australia. So this would be a gathering of Canadian, American. It's not so much the nationalities, but it's on every continent. These people would come with their wisdom to meet with quantum physicists. The first one who came was David Bohm, who apparently had tried to get a gathering like this together for like 2 other times previous to the first one, in 1992 in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And Dan Moonhawk Alfred was the linguist who showed up. He often would say, sort of jokingly, but it was true, that he hung out at the lonely intersection of linguistics, consciousness, quantum physics, and Native American science. So that was important. But more than that, Dan Moonhawk Alfred was an extraordinary individual. I met him when those dialogues opened up to the public, and so I came to an early one It was the second time they'd had it, my first, and I got to meet Dan Moonhawk Alford, and he was just so warm, so inclusive, and he wanted to make sure that everybody felt included in the dialogue and the discussion. This was even afterwards. This was in his hotel room at night. He would still be talking with people about the ideas. Some of the ideas that he would talk about would include the fact that in most of the, or many of the native traditions, in their languages, they use verbs to describe everything. In our Western English, we are so presumptive that nouns describe everything, that we even describe, for example, God as a noun. That's not what the indigenous people do. They could talk all day with verbs only, no nouns at all, and even describe God as a verb. And this is a way of thinking. The importance of it comes in when you look at quantum physics, as this is why David Bohm wanted to bring these dialogues together. And this was at the Fetzer Institute in Kalamazoo, Michigan, 1992. And the gathering at that time, and Moonhawk wrote about it, and I was reading what he wrote. So this is the mindset I was in. I had watched a documentary that was filmed at one of those first public gatherings. And if you look closely, I'm in that video in the audience just listening a couple times. It's a 1-hour documentary, and it covers some of these ideas when people would come together and talk. And the power of it, as I was getting to, is that when you take that starting point and recognize language shapes the way that we think, which is the idea of Benjamin Lee Whorf, a linguist that Dan Moonhawk Alford frequently spoke of, and you recognize that if you think for a second that A always equals A, and you build your entire model of logic based on that, you'll come up with something quite different than if you recognize, which is equally valid, that indeed you can never step into the same river twice, because the second time you step in it, it's a different river. And you know that if you've ever gone fishing in a river and there's stuff floating down, the fish change, wind changes, everything changes. It depends on time of day and that sort of thing. So when we assume, it's a huge assumption, first of all, that there are nouns, that everything is a thing, instead of recognizing that everything might be a process, then you're in a suboptimal place to take a look at quantum physics. And this is the brilliance of David Bohm when he looked at his implicit and explicit order and the wholeness of everything and the interconnectedness of everything. These are the ideas that Dan Moonhawk Alford was noticing as the linguist in the room. People turned to him and said, "Can you please take a look at what everybody's agreeing on at this first gathering?" And some of the agreements were that actually everything is vibrating, everything. Number 2, everything is changing, it's in flux, it's moving. Number 3, everything is interconnected. So these are 3 brilliant takeaways that the quantum physicists, including David Bohm, the linguists, and the people in the room such as Leroy Littlebear, who was very instrumental in all of these gatherings, and he also was there when I attended them in the public ones. So this is extraordinary, and that was the mindset I was in, recognizing that in some way, even though Dan Moonhawk Alford may have died, he's still with us. He still has his papers available for us to read. He's in the documentary, which I highly recommend, The Language of Spirituality. It's about a 1-hour documentary all about these gatherings and some of the wonderful things that took place there. And that's why I say that when I get a sighting on a day like that, when I'd been just looking into this, my favorite bird in the world that I'd never seen in my home, certainly, not to mention the fact that this is the only bird that I've ever seen looking directly at me in the eyes as it flies straight toward me. And then, like the Blue Angels coordinated fighter jets, they can all move together. Shoo! That's what it did. It just came straight at me and then would go up. And 3 times to me is a blessing, it's a gift, it's a message, and that's why I believe it's for all of us, because it's very much intrinsic to what I was studying and looking at in the gatherings of these language of spirit dialogues that David Bohm, Leroy Littlebear, Dan Moonhawk Alford were so instrumental in bringing into being. And this is the wisdom tradition that all of us can continue to learn from, even today and going forward. So until next time, this is Cynthia Sue Larson with realityshifters.com, inviting you to keep asking my favorite question: how good can it get? Thanks so much.